this is Pam from Your Nurse Advocate Consulting, and we are back, Bedside Stories, episode 6. Now, this is where we're going to get into this situation with this emergency room, this new emergency room doctor just got so out of hand. And I just felt the patients were not getting the best care possible. So these next couple of episodes are going to talk about me finding my voice and getting the courage up to confront this doctor and to accept the consequences that came with the results of my actions. So let's get into this. So we're in the emergency room, and the emergency room director had hired a new emergency room physician, and he was, moonlighting. He was, working part-time, and he was working night shifts. So his very first shift I was working nights when my kids were little. And so I was still working night shifts. And so he started, and I already didn't care for him because he was very flirtatious with the nurses. And I just really didn't get a good feeling about him, out of the get-go. And what he did is he brought now this 30 years ago. So this is back in the 80s and the late 80s now, early 90s. And he brought in a disc with Vanna White and Wheel of Fortune. And so he wanted to have this game to play in between patients or when he had downtime or whatever. So, I didn't think anything of it. Well, what he ended up doing is he loaded this game on our Lifeline computer. Now, what that meant was when people push their button, when they have a pendant or a watch, and they go to Lifeline, and then it goes through their emergency contacts, no one answers, and then it ends up, going to 911. We at the emergency room were answering that button, that response. We were the response people. There wasn't another company that was handling the responses of this life alert. It was us. It was us at the emergency room. We were also the poison control. If someone called poison control in our area, it was us in the emergency room that handled that, poison control. And we had a special computer where we would look up all the drugs and interactions and things like that. So he loaded up this game onto the Lifeline computer, and it knocked out the entire Lifeline program all night long. So if somebody pushed their button and needed assistance and needed 911 and needed to have a send a rescue squad there, they wouldn't have had it done because it was not working. And he sweated all night long trying to get that computer back up online. And we told him not to put it on that computer. That was the Lifeline. And he says, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. And 5 minutes to 7 before the next emergency room doctor came on for shift, they were on 12-hour shifts, 7 to 7 p, and then 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And so the next doctor was coming in at 7 in the morning, and he had 5 minutes to spare before that doctor came in, and he got it on. And I didn't say anything. There's a lot of other people that worked in the emergency room, and I probably should have said something right away, but I didn't. And, I was kind of chicken, and, I was old school in nursing school. We were raised to, cover the nurses or the doctors' butts. And, we always, that's how we were brought up in nursing school. Now, today, it's a lot different. I mean, nurses in nursing school are taught that, doctors are humans, doctors are people too. They make mistakes just like we make mistakes, and that you need to be able to have the ability and the assertiveness to question a doctor if you don't understand something or if you feel that something maybe isn't correct. But that's not how it was back when we went to nursing school. So it was kind of a big deal to call out a doctor. And so that was, to me, that was strike number 1. Now, strike number 2 came when there was a baby that I was working. Remember, we talked before, there's the 2 big cardiac rooms where all your big traumas and your heart attacks, your bad stuff go. Then you could work on the trauma. That was injuries, cuts, bruises, lacerations, broken bones, sprained ankles. So that was trauma. And on the other side of the emergency room, you could, as a nurse, you could be assigned to the medical. These would just be medical things. All the kids went over there with ear infections. If you had belly pain or, shortness of breath, maybe you're having an asthma attack, you weren't on the medical side of the emergency room. So I was working medical side, and a baby and a young mom came in, and the baby was really struggling to breathe. It was wheezing, making that whistling sound. When you look at a kid, if you can see their belly, their chest sucking in under their breastbone, or the skin, or it's sucking in around their ribs, they call that retractions, and that means they're using extra accessory muscles to be able to breathe. So they're struggling pretty good. And so I took my vitals. I did everything that I was supposed to do so that the emergency room doctor would go see this baby. And he went in there and he examined the baby, and he came out, and I says, "Are we admitting that baby?" He says, "No, poor parenting skills." I says, "What do you mean poor parenting skills? The kid's struggling to breathe." I said, we can't send that baby home that way. Oh, poor parenting skills, poor parenting skills. So I took this was my first leap into kind of going through the back door, because I felt very strongly that that baby could not go home. And so my pediatrician, when you're a mom with 4 kids, you get to know your pediatrician very well. So my pediatrician was on call for the clinic that baby belonged to. So I snuck away, to a phone where he couldn't hear me. And I called him and I said, "We've got one of the babies from your clinic down here. ER doctor doesn't feel the baby needs to be admitted. I feel strongly that the baby needs to be admitted. Would you mind checking on this baby?" And he says, "No worries." He says, "I'm just upstairs on the pediatric unit checking on a couple of our kids here in the hospital. I'll be down in a minute." So a couple minutes later, he comes down and he comes into the emergency room, and he says to the emergency room doctor, he says, "Hey, I was upstairs, checking my kids." And he said, "Do you have anybody from our clinic that you'd like me to take a look at?" A lot of times the ER docs didn't really like taking care of babies. That wasn't really their strength. And so anytime the pediatricians would offer to take a peek at the babies, they were all for that. So he says, "Nah." He says, "You got one over there, but I'm sending the baby home. Poor parenting skills. Baby doesn't need anything." Well, then my pediatrician says, "Well, I don't mind. I'll go see him." "No, no, you don't need to see him." He says, "I'm here. I'm just going to go in and peek into the kid." So takes the chart and he goes in to the room, and our emergency room, the nurse's station was kind of set up like a horseshoe. And so the emergency room doctor was sitting with his back to the medical room where the baby's room was, and he was looking at an x-ray up on the x-ray board. And the pediatrician came out of the room and came up behind him, and he took the chart and he slammed it down on the counter, and the emergency room doctor just jumped up and whipped around. He says, what's going on?" And the pediatrician says, "I don't know what kind of medicine you're practicing on, people, but I don't want you practicing your kind of medicine on kids from our clinic. This baby's admitted." So he looked over at me, and, I knew he knew that I called. And so, I didn't think anything of it. And so anyway, the baby got admitted, and I just said, "Well, you know what? I don't care. He can be mad at me or give me dirty looks or whatever. I don't care. I would have done it all over again, because that baby needed to get help and needed to be in the admitted to the hospital." And so things settled down, and I just stayed away from him. And um next time I worked with him, and for some reason, I just got that unlucky luck of the draw that I would, really get to work with him almost every time he was doing his shift. And so I was working with him again, and this time I was working trauma. So I was working the injuries part of the emergency room, and had a guy come in, and he cut his hand, and he worked at a factory. And I said, "Can you move your thumb?" And oftentimes we would ask them, when you've got, a cut in it near a digit or near an area, where you're using your hand, we would ask them if we could move it, because if they had trouble moving it, then that might give us a hint that maybe they had cut a tendon, and that they may need a hand surgeon versus just being sewn up by the emergency room doctor. So we just try and collect all the information we could so that we could give a good, handoff to the doctor before he went in the room to examine the patient. So he walks in as I'm saying, "Move your thumb." And the doctor says, "Don't move your thumb." And the patient says, "Move my thumb? Don't move my thumb. What do you want me to do?" And he looked at me, and then he looked at the patient. He says, "I'm the doctor. She's the nurse. She doesn't know what she's talking about. You listen to me. And I walked out, and you know what? I had to smile because right away I was just thinking payback, about what they say about paybacks. And so I just chuckled and just tried to let it roll off. But that was, our friction was deepening at that point. And so I'm going to save the strike three for our next episode, which will be episode 7. And this incident led him to getting fired. But what I will say is that did not come without backlash. So stay tuned for episode 7 as we continue the story about this emergency room doctor. And we'll see you back here soon. And don't hesitate to check out some of our videos. We are nurse advocates caring for aging adults and their adult children and putting plans in place for seniors. So check out some of the things if you've got an aging adult in your life. We'll see you back here for episode number 7, Bedside Stories.